And hello, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Baghurst, and today's special guest is Jacob Yorg. He is the Executive Director of GameChanger Athletes. Jacob, I'm going to let you explain what that is, but if you wouldn't mind, talk us a little bit about how you got into this position in the first place.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting thing. You know, I spent the last 13 years in collegiate athletics, and when I moved back after 5 years of being a D2 head women's basketball coach, I really started to recognize the failures I probably did in mental performance and where my student athletes were on the mental side of things. So when I was working on my first doctorate in higher ed leadership, I really dove into institutional culture and really of what we as coaches and athletic departments are doing, and started to recognize even more I wouldn't say failures, but some of the things we weren't probably doing the best in athletics and helping this generation of student athlete be successful. So it's kind of moved me into really loving the idea of, I have a counseling background. I teach undergrad psychology courses and have for years. And I'm like, best of both worlds, coaching, mental health, what can we do? So when I started working on my second doctorate in clinical with emphasis in sports psych, I really started to dive in doing mental performance work with teams. I work with about 20, 25 college programs and sports, all kinds, and I just enjoyed it. And it's just fun. It's a different side of coaching. You start recognizing how much more benefit you can do as a coach if you actually meet the players where they're at. So when this opportunity came that GameChanger Athletes was looking for a new executive director, one of the board members is a good friend of mine, and I actually created a mental performance program for her high school. And she said, would I be interested? And I'm like, I think it's the best of both worlds. And, for me, it allows me an opportunity to stay in coaching. I still coach high school girls basketball, but it gives me an opportunity to continue to coach athletes, coach players, coach parents on something that I think in this generation, especially with COVID, mental health, and the idea that it's not just about athletic side of thing anymore. We have to really start looking at the mental side, makes it exciting. So I think it's a great opportunity that I was given. And it's one I've been, in the last 3 weeks, since I officially started, have been going nonstop to try to make it into something special.
You said mental performance, and then you said mental health. Can you identify the differences between those and also recognize maybe that there are qualifications that come with making those or using those kind of words?
Yeah, I mean, mental health for me, I have a clinical background. I do therapy still to this day, mental health background. And for me, when I talk about mental health, it is understanding that and when I use it, in my sense of my student athletes and the people I work with may have things that they are dealing with, mental health struggles is a lot of times something that I do with that I in no way ever will, in this role, clinically diagnose. I will never, in this sense, deal with those. So when mental health in the classification of counseling and therapy, the criteria for that is one that even though I have it, I separate a lot in when I'm doing mental performance work. And when I talk to student athletes and coaches about the mental performance side, I separate the understanding that they might be going through things, but we are going to specifically talk about the mental side of their athletic performance or academic performance, or even some theater and even some military possibly basis as well, on how the mental aspects like motivation, social approval, perfectionism, and how some of those things affecting their ability to be successful in whatever job performance or athletic performance they're dealing with, which also comes in its own things. I have working on my stuff in my background in sports psych. I also have finished up my paperwork, just waiting for the finalizing and becoming a CMPC from the Association for Applied Sports Psych. So for CMPC, for those who don't know, Certified Mental Performance Consultant, which I'm excited about getting it all finalized. But those are the certification difference, especially when we talk walking mental performance. I think a lot of people sometimes use who have a basic understanding. Mental game coach, I think, is what I've heard of late. So for me, is mental health is just understanding that side of the world, but also mental performance is very, for me, specifically about performance when it comes to activities, jobs. And I use a lot, honestly, in academic work as well with some of my student athletes. because I think it correlates very well with some of their academic needs, as well as their athletic needs.
Yeah, I guess wanted to clarify at the beginning that we can't just throw around these terms.
No.
There are expectations
yeah.
that you have training in order to use those terms as somebody such as yourself who does. If you go back to, you talked about being a Division II, collegiate Division II coach, and you said I look back and realize some of the things that I should have been doing that I wasn't doing. Can you give examples of what you mean by that?
Oh, of course. Luckily for me, as part of my doctoral work, I always say it must have been reflection time, because I a lot of times discussed a lot of the various aspects of that in it. And one of the biggest things is you getting to understand your student athletes and where they're at. I think is one thing we talk about a lot. For me, is where are my student athletes at? Getting to know them, making those connections.
Can I pause you there?
Yep.
What you just said is something that has been said by, I would say, many coaches, getting to know your athletes. And I usually follow up that question, and I'm going to here and say, well, how do you do that? What specifically, beyond what I typically hear, I just talk to them. Did you have any specific ways that you got to know your athletes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think for me in collegiate, and even now in high school, is you get to know them for the things that have nothing to do with your sport. So like for me, as I know about my players' families, I mean, I get to know them. I get to talk to them about their siblings, what their siblings like to do. I am there supporting them at their other events that have nothing to do with my sport. I get to know them. Of course, for me, it's a little different because of my background. Like I learn what their baseline is in behavior. I get to know them well enough to know that are they having a good day or a bad day? If they're having a good day, then I'm going to make sure I say, hey, what was amazing that happened today? It seems like you were really ecstatic. If something sounds like, hey, is everything going good? You just don't seem like, it might have been a bad day. Hey, if you want to talk, I'm here. Because one of the first things I always tell my players, I always did was, if you're having a bad day or something that might hinder your ability to perform, I don't need to know what it is. Just FYI me something's going on so that I can evaluate you, knowing that you have a unique situation. So for me, connection is understanding that everybody's unique. I think sometimes we think everybody deals with things the exact same way in coaching. And in reality, it's not true. Mm-hmm. Like two players are not going to handle the same situation. Two players cannot be coached the same way. Two players need two completely different communication styles. So for me, the connection comes with understanding that, one, and two, taking the time to figure out what their needs are from me. Because I think not only on basketball and coaching, but it's also about helping them grow as a person. And some of that means is what a good communication relationship should be when it comes to the good and the bad.
Again, going back to your coaching years, getting to know your players, obviously crucial. What about performance things? Did you look back and go, you know what, I worked for this athlete the wrong way to get the best out of them? Or perhaps even you was so obsessed with winning, which is what college athletics is expecting of you, that I missed out some opportunities to help somebody grow. I'm really just asking what you learned from that process that maybe coaches coming through who haven't had your opportunities can perhaps avoid those situations or benefit from your experience.
I mean, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest struggles I had is my identity as a coach was based off of winning. And and my happiness was based off of winning. So, which is a completely wrong way to have a mindset of coaching. Because when you were in college or even in high school, your livelihood is based off the happiness of 18 to 23-year-old student athletes and what they're dealing with in their own growth. And it's hard to make your identity on a winning where you don't have complete control. So for me, part of what I have learned in going forward is understanding what are the process goals that I talk a lot with myself and my players for myself. Can I see growth? Can I see, and what does growth look like? Are they improving in their footwork? Are they improving their balance? Are we improving in our communication? Are we improving in those process things, knowing that if we can attain them, then we will naturally have the success, which is not only saying if we have success, we're not only going to handle those things the right way. I mean, I see a lot of teams that win, but aren't consistent. For me, can I build a consistency in what we do to make success a continual thing and not just we won this year, but we won't win next year because this kid graduated. And also the fact is that who I am as an individual and my self-worth is not relying on how many games we win, because I don't have full control of when we play who in the schedule, where we're playing them at, and who gets hurt and who's sick, especially with COVID. So I think for me, the greatest thing I always try to tell coaches is who you are as a person in no way is indicative of who you are as a coach. And if you are a good person, you're striving to become the best version of yourself to help your student athletes, you will always be successful. And if you do it the right way, you will also be successful on the floor. Because at the end of the day, these student athletes will only be successful if they feel you believe in them, that you care about them, and you have their best interests in heart, especially in the times where you're going to have to be extremely hard on them, because they're not used to being held to high expectations, what I would call the correct way. They're used to being held in high expectations based off the societal way of how is this going to make us look, how many points you scored, not you're an amazing teammate. Mm-hmm. You set up that cut so well that you opened it up for somebody else to score. I mean, that's what I strive to do with my own players, is because it's so uncommon. They don't know how to react. So those are some of the things I've just learned from other failures that I didn't always do it because I was so wrapped up in, if we don't win, I'm a horrible coach. I'm going to get fired. Instead of, I have an amazing group of young women that I am striving to really help become the best versions of themselves. And if I do my job well, they're going to help me be successful across the board, not just in this one little area of win losses.
It is uncommon for me to have Division II experience on this show, for whatever reason. Lack of volunteers, who knows? But I, having worked in Division II myself, I understand some of the challenges associated with being in Division II as opposed to Division I, where maybe finances and many other things are available to you. How did you juggle all of the responsibilities that you have as a Division II coach, where yes, winning and losing is still paramount. Oh, but Jacob, we also need you to do this, and this. How do you not get burned out? How do you control that stress?
Well, and I wish I could tell you I did a good job of it. Being a former Catholic, being a Catholic high school teacher in my career, you learn to wear many hats and you learn the efficiency necessary to do it. While I was in my last D2 job at the University of Wisconsin Parkside, in the course of my 5 years, I was the head women's basketball coach. I taught in the health exercise science department. I was a director of compliance multiple times, had duties assigned to me all the time. I think the biggest thing for me is trying to find ways to put the most important thing all the time. And for me, that was my players. And I did not always do it the best, but it was trying to prioritize things on needs. Utilize your assistant as much as I can. I was blessed to have, during that time, an amazing assistant who's now a NAI head coach doing great things in Courtney Boyd. And she just helped me manage some of the things I couldn't do at that time. I mean, I think you also have to recognize in your own self that there's some things you just can't get done and be okay with it, which for me is not an easy thing. But it also led to me a lot of growth. I mean, I failed on multiple occasions of being an amazing coach because I was trying to be an amazing compliance director for 300 student athletes and teach a class. And for me, it was the hardest thing. I mean, it's the biggest recognition of now of why I do some of the things I do is because I recognize I failed in those sides. Bad things that happened in another duty would creep over to basketball, but I think at the end of the day is you do it for the right reasons. And if you put them in focus, you find time to do it well. But if you don't, it realistically, it's rough. I mean, I look back at now that sometimes that I probably wasn't happy. I wasn't having fun. because when you coach 10% of the time and you're doing everything else 90% of the time, that's not why any of us get into coaching. And that's why I love when coaches says, oh, I want to coach. It's, I just work with the kids. I'm like, would be nice. Doesn't happen very often. But that makes it fun. The problem is it's how you handle the 90% will dictate how much fun and how good you can be at the 10. And that's just reality. D1's great when it comes to multiple jobs and you can stick to 2 things. There would be days that I would have practice at 6 a.m. I would have to go teach a class. I would have to go deal with compliance, and I would be on the road for 4 or 5 hours going to watch a kid, get home at midnight, 1 a.m., have 6 o'clock practice the next day. I'm on the road making phone calls, dealing with issues. But it's your job, and it's what you're expected to do.
It's your job, but it's also, it's not, to me, it's not healthy and sustainable to continually do that.
Oh, no way. That's why you don't see. Yeah.
Did that contribute to you saying, you know what, I'm doing something else?
I think it's part. For me, I think it's one reason why you see sometimes athletic programs being okay with not having success anymore in some programs, because they are more needing the coaches to do other things than focus on creating a successful program. And I think that comes from the top down. I think it's what's the most important thing to the institution. From my own personal view, sometimes I think we have the wrong point of emphasis in today in Division II athletics.
Can you give an example of what you mean from top down? Is it graduation rates? Is it complaints? What are we talking about?
I think it's more the fact is retention to one thing. It's about fundraising and how much money are we bringing in? Are we more concerned about perceptual views of our institution? Or is it the student athletes? I think for me, the student athletes are always my priority. So for me, is everything I tried to ever do was based on the premise that I wanted my student athletes to have the best experience. I think sometimes that philosophy has skewed to, is it about the student athlete experience, or is it about how many more students can we bring in? How much money are we fundraising as a department? What is the external view of our institution? Sometimes I feel it takes priority over the student athletes. How many student athletes are happy, which is an interesting dynamic in itself based on how people do assessments of coaches. I think it's interesting to me how I think it says a lot when we care about how kids are happy without specifying how do we want them to have an experience? What experience do we want to have? I think that's important. And how much are we willing to spend? I always, for me as a D2 coach, I had to fundraise a lot just to take care of my players in a way that they deserve to get taken care of, because of just how budget was. So how much budget are you given? How much resources are you given? Another big thing I've learned now is the fact that are they willing to put somebody in with mental performance background, or somebody a direct link to a counselor across campus who can help the students' generation? That is in Division II. There is no mental performance positions or direct counselor positions for athletics common at all. But we know from COVID, student health, mental health struggles, all of that is becoming the biggest hindrance in the academic and performance in general of athletics. But we're spending more money to hire more marketing people and more things. So I think sometimes that's the skewed view of what are we putting our money towards and what is the implication that gives. I think sometimes is, for me, the struggle. I think that we're missing the boat of what made Division II so amazing when I coached it. It was the best of both worlds, the best of D3 and D1. The academics and the athletics, I think, was skewing away to that a little bit too much sometimes, in my opinion. And that's one thing I hope it changes.
You mentioned that you fundraised a lot, and I think this is a challenge for a lot of coaches who are perhaps taught how to coach the X's and O's of the sport, but not the 90% that you alluded to. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice on fundraising? What things were successful? What did you find worked for you that other coaches may may find beneficial for them to apply in their world?
For me, it was about relationships. I mean, as most people learn about me fast, I'm an extreme extrovert. So I don't struggle with talking very often. So it's building relationships. In my time, I built relationships with people who ran some large exposure tournaments in the USJN for girls basketball. And we hosted them a couple times a year. It was benefit of both worlds. We got fundraising money for the facility, but also I got 3,000 high school age girls on campus every year, seeing our campus that normally wouldn't. I worked with area businesses, especially small businesses who needed to get some name recognition. And we really worked together to get them to understand what we were trying to do. I mean, I think it also, for me, it was big that we were a big community service group. Every place I've been, I strive to be very much a community service. So we had a mentorship program with a local middle school down the road from us. And we built that partnership and we worked with those students, and people wanted to be a part of it. They saw the good we were trying to do in the community, and they wanted to help us out and do more. And I think sometimes we want to go to people and say, give me money, give me stuff because we need money. But we never come and says, come be a partner with us. And this is what we're doing to make a difference in these lives. And this is how it's going to help. I think that's the biggest thing I think I see a lot of coaches missing out on is how are we promoting the good we are doing so that people feel when they donate that they are giving to a cause that's going to benefit society, which I think sometimes people forget. Coaching is going to help benefit society in the future if we help this next generation become better people. So I think if we use that approach, people are more willing to. And there was years I fundraised 50, 60 grand because that's what we want to do trips. And that's what we want to do what we wanted to do. And for me is you have to go out and you have to find people who understand your mission and vision of a program and your mission and vision as an institution and get them to buy into not just me, but what these young women in that case are going to do going forward. The students I've coached are doing amazing things in the community. A lot of times in Kenosha, where some of them a lot have stayed, like that's what they gave money to. These young women who are now making a difference in the lives of children and adults in health professions and schools. I mean, and I think that's the selling point. Help us create this next generation of leaders we want in the world, seeing the issues we already have and building connections with people with the same things. I mean, USJN was a great connection for me. I mean, I go to them. They came on campus. We would probably get 5, 6 kids a year just as students in that. Well, as an institution, that's money. I mean, that you can bring in. And so I made money by helping the school. I mean, how can you tag team those relationships is a big thing for me. But coaches have to recognize that's not something easy. You can't just put up a website and say, give me money. You have to go out and do things and go out and volunteer and go out and just show people how amazing your student athletes are. And when you do that, people are always going to be willing to help. People want to give to causes they believe in. That's why we all donate. And student athletes are an amazing cause because we know the good they do in their jobs because of what they have learned as being student athletes.
Now, as somebody who's worked in a female sport, I understand some of the challenges that can be associated with that when you have an equitable male sport in the same venue, in the same organization. And as somebody who coached women's basketball, I'm making the assumption there's also a men's basketball team there. How do you stay visible in an environment or a society where sports are typically supported more heavily toward men? The audience who come and watch a game typically come to the men's game instead of the women's game. The funding, typically goes to the men over the women. And these are, I think, hard truths to say, but we have to say them. It's the reality of sports. And I've seen it time and time again in collegiate sports where women's teams are almost treated as a requirement rather than an equal member of an athletic program. How do you, as a coach of a female team, make sure that the women, your team, is visible, is supported, gets the funding, and really ensures that there is equity?
And I always will probably say the fact is I just tick people off. Because the fact is, I think not only I've always predominantly coached female sports. In all the sports I've coached, I've always been predominantly female sports. Partly because I feel the fact is I'm a huge advocate for women's sports in general. And so for me, as being a male coaching a female sport, I think for me allows me sometimes probably a little more freedom to be the person who complains about things. So I was never quiet, never will be quiet about equity on things. If it's practice time, if it is funding, it is exposure, but also I don't sit back and just wait. So we would do events, breast cancer awareness game, military appreciation game. I mean, I would dress in pink suits. I would dress in red, white, and blue suits. I would do everything under the sun. And I would promote us to the ends of the earth if I could in any way I can. And it got me in trouble sometimes because I would always do things, once again, in my view, in the best interest of my student athletes. So I am going to make sure that they feel appreciated for all the work they do for not only the program, the school, and everything. And the problem even comes is that there was times in my career where I was held back in some of the things I want to do because the men didn't want to do it. And that's a struggle for me because we've been holding back some females in sports for years. So if I want to do something benefiting them in the appreciation, I don't know why that's a problem if somebody else doesn't. So I think for me it's a fight, and it's an everyday fight. And I was talking about this in the morning with somebody else is we have to do a better job as a society, especially if you're coaching women's sports, in empowering this generation of young women to recognize that they are uniquely special in their own way to make a difference in this world, and that they have the right to not have to feel like they have to conform to meet the needs of society because they don't. And so for me, that's one of the biggest things I always fight for. And regrettably, it's never going to be easy because if you're a male coaching women's sports and you do it, you get one view. If you're a female coaching women's sports and you do it, there's another view. And it's never positive. And that's one of the biggest things that I struggle with is it's a perceptual issue that if we can't show these young women that they deserve the respect that comes with equity, how do we expect them to go into the world and make the difference that we will need them to make if they always are being told that they are beneath other people based on things they can't change? And that's, I think, the cause that I think sometimes coaches don't want to take a chance on because they're afraid of it's going to be retaliation or they're going to get fired. I'm to the point in my career, I just don't care. Because at the end of the day, I can't look at my players in the face, especially young women, and promote their need to be treated like the unique individuals they are, that they can do the exact same things as other people, and then be afraid to stand up for that because I'm afraid I'm going to get fired or something's going to happen to me, because I think it's just hypocritical. And so I think that's the biggest struggle that I tell young coaches is if you're going to coach women's sports, you better be ready for the fight, and you better be ready not to back down for the fight. Now, there's ways to do it correctly, and there's channels to do it, and you have to make sure that you show what you're going to do first. But I will tell people I will never back down if I see inequity, because, and if I do, I'm going to fight it, but I am not ever going to allow them to see it, because I will never let my players feel that they are not equal when it comes to all those aspects. I'm just going to take care of it. I'm going to fight it in the background. And so the only thing they see is that they deserve this. They're getting what they deserve, and they never feel like they're second fiddle. But they're never going to recognize it in my eyes. I'm going to try to make sure they never even know it's a possibility and know what I'm doing. Because I don't want them to think that somebody has to fight for them to get what they deserve.
when you look at coaching and your experiences in coaching and now in what you do as an executive director, what 2 or 3 things would you advise coaches who are maybe coming into the profession or early career coaches that you've learned along the way that you think need to be passed on to them?
Well, I think a couple things. I think in coaching wise, I think one of the biggest things is just because it looks good doesn't mean it's going to fit you. I mean, I think a lot of us, we go to these coaching clinics, we listen to people talk, and it's all about, oh, this is great here, great here. At the end of the day, everything I hear, and I'm a huge learner, and this is finishing up 6th degree. I love to learn, but not everything fits everybody. So understand yourself, understand your team, understand what your strengths are, understand what your struggles are, and listen to people based on what you can take and what you then can use that fits you, and don't try to be anybody else. I think and as a young coach, I want to be everybody else. You weren't successful, I was going to follow you. Now it's like, how can I be my unique self and pull from everybody? I think another thing in coaching is just you need to know your why. You got to know why you're coaching. If it's because you want to look good or get success, no one cares about you. I mean, they care about your players. And like I used to joke with a newspaper, I'm like, don't post my picture about a story about us. My parents are not buying the newspaper. They could care less. Put the student athletes first in your coaching. And if that's your mindset, I'm doing this because of student athletes, you'll never go wrong. Build your practices based off of needs. Like, what are we going to need for a game? What do we need? What's the purpose of it? If you can't explain the purpose, if you can't understand how it fits in the scheme of what you're doing, don't do it, because it's a waste of time. In my job now, I mean, the biggest thing it is in creating curriculum that I do right now for colleges and high schools and mental performance and working with students is I think coaches have to understand the way we used to do things doesn't work anymore. Like, we can't say because, well, so-and-so did it when I was playing. Doesn't work anymore. This generation is not that generation. This group is so different. This generation is probably the most empathetic generation I've ever seen in my life. Even in my original research, I learned that we have people transferring. Women's basketball players are transferring because how you treat other players, not how you treat them. So I think the biggest thing of what I do now is, as coaches, we have to recognize the mental performance side of the game is a necessity if you want to be successful going forward, because our players have so much noise in their ears between social media and everybody around them that we have to help them understand how to maximize their ability and how to use all this, what's coming in the right way, instead of worrying about this person thinks I'm bad, or I need to focus better here, or, I need to be perfect all the time. I can't miss any shots. Like, that's the reality of part of coaching now. And that's in how we communicate. One of my research studies I'm doing right now is the effects of coaching communication on mental health and performance of student athletes. We do not understand as coaches how we say it and how our tone is and how our body language and when we say things, the multitude effect it is having on our student athletes. And so we have to reflect on this and recognize am I reacting in what I'm saying, or am I reflecting in what I'm saying? And what's in the best interest? If you react and you're yelling, that has nothing to do with your player. That's about you. If you're reflecting and trying to figure out what your player needs to hear at this time to correct or fix or help them, that's what they need now. Now, none of us had that when we were playing. Like, I was called everything under the sun. I was told the only thing holding me back in basketball was talent. That was what the comment I got from my coach. If I said that now, I'd be fired. Now it is like, it's about empowerment, not scaling or fearing or putting down. It's about affirming. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing I've learned in coaching, but also just in now, I sit and watch practices all day long. And most of my notes to coaches is, it comes in a question. Do you understand how what you are saying to them is being received, and how are they taking it? Because if you did, you probably would change some of the things you say, because you are not getting the desired result, but you keep doing it. Punitive running. There are so many other things that are more beneficial. Running is not a consequence. Running is a part of the athletic ability. Like things like that. And that's one thing in the job I'm in now, if what makes it fun, because I can share that information. Similar to what you guys are doing in your program is you can share this new age research that we are recognizing all the probably bad things that we've done for so many years and how much change we can make just by knowing our student athletes better, or just by knowing what their needs are, and understanding that some days is just going to be a bad day and it's not personal. Like I have kids sometimes that just, let's be real. They're going to have breakups and they're just not going to have a good practice. Okay. It's not the end of my life. They'll come back. Let's take care of them as a person first, not in just looking at them as a basketball player.
If somebody does have a question for you, maybe watching this in future, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, I mean, they can email me. GameChangerAthletes.org is the website, and Yorg at GameChangerAthletes.org is my email. And one of the things, as I said, that we're doing in GameChanger is we're doing mental performance curriculum, online curriculum, hybrid curriculum, really helping those who normally couldn't afford it. It's a free program. It's based off team needs. It does the assessments. The blessing of my background, being able to help out programs, is a lot of things I talked about today about what I've learned is just helping this next generation of athletes. I think they have so much promise, but we're missing the boat. So for me and the organization and what we're trying to do is trying to find ways to give them a way of learning and growing with somebody who cares, who's going to help direct them for all the people who can't afford it. Because as we know, it's not a cheap thing. It's like anything. It's cost effective. But I think that's the biggest thing. And I am open. And as I said, everything we do is free. Everything is willing to be shared. Anybody having questions, comments, they can always email me anytime they want. I appreciate this opportunity. Of course, this has been fun as always. And I'm glad you reached out of looking for people to come on.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you all for watching, whether it be now or in the future. Of course, if you have questions for Jacob, reach out to him directly. But on behalf of myself, Tim Baggerstein, Jacob, Yorg, thank you so much for watching.